This meeting is being recorded.
So that's the first item on the agenda. Since George has that up, is there anything in addition that people see? George, you have to keep muting Emily because she can't seem to figure out how to get rid of one of herself. Maybe she did. Emily, unmute yourself and introduce yourself, Emily.
Okay.
No, not yet.
Well, I guess it's my computer. Because it's telling me that the host has muted me.
Well, Emily, we can see you and hear you, but you're on with another device, Emily, so you need to shut down the other device that you're on with. So are you on with your phone too? We can't hear you because you're muted.
But hang up your phone.
She's still trying to talk through the muted thing.
I'd just like to say that I'm excited that the National Congress passed the resolution. And
can I connect my phone and get off the computer?
Yes, Emily, you need to get off of one of the devices you're on.
I'm on the computer only. Give me the phone number I can connect with. I'll get off the computer. I'm having trouble with my computer. So what's the phone number?
Oh, that's good, Emily.
Well, I need to take down the phone number.
No, it's fine now.
It's fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, so introduce yourself, Emily.
Oh,
I removed the other person.
My name is Emily Ricketts, and I am a member, a very recent member of the Tucson chapter.
Well, and we're glad to have you. So, George, since I'm not sure what Robin was saying, but just a little background on the UN Decade for People of African Descent. It actually started January 1 of 2015, but the Wolf Triennial Congress that was held in 2015 did not mention it. Then there was another Congress in 2018 which did not mention it. So for this Congress, I really pushed the International Secretariat to make sure that we didn't let the decade go by without having a resolution. So this resolution came about through the workshop that George and I did on equity and inclusion section by section. And I do want to say that I am just amazed at how the International Secretariat and their human rights director, Patricia Scanella, managed to take the resolution and create something very, very strong. So George, if you could put up the actual resolution, and even though I think the copy you have says draft, it's no longer a draft. Meanwhile, while you're doing that, let's get a quick intro from Linda Conti and then from Joan Goddard. So Linda, would you introduce yourself since you're another board member who's on the call?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I just joined. I was out. I'm anxious to learn more. I live north of New York City. I used to be at the UN and be an NGO rep. So I'm very interested in this whole subject and I'm looking forward to the meeting.
Thank you. And so Joan, you're here now.
Yes, thank you. I'm in the San Jose, California area, And I'm glad to be here also. Thank you. Thanks for the call, George.
So George, could you read the cover note that Patricia put into the resolution, because it's a kind of acknowledgement that they failed to do the resolution in 2015. That's the way I read it. So could you read the cover note, George?
Sure. This is a resolution on supporting the International Decade for People of African Descent, sponsored by the US section, and we encourage Congress to approve it as a proactive step to live up to our analysis and commitments in the 2015 manifesto.
Well, the resolution was sent to all of you, and so there are lots of details which relate back to the Durban conference in 2001, because that was kind of the catalyst for these leading up to the 15 years that led to the UN decade. And I think Robin was actually at that international meeting by the UN. So Robin, did you want to say something about your experience in Durban in 2001? Can't hear you, Robin. Unmute yourself, Robin. Okay.
It was an extraordinary experience. Women and men from around the world of color and of facing different discriminations, such as the Dalits of India that I didn't know about. And many prominent people came to speak. Mbeki, who was then, I think, president of South Africa, and other folks. And of course, the tragedy of the whole thing was that it ended on September 8th, and a lot of us got home on September 11th. And I arrived in New York at 9 a.m. and one of the twin towers had been hit, but at least my plane got into, was able to land. And I bring this up because on a certain level, I think that event eclipsed this amazing Congress in Durban. So I'm so glad that it's coming back now, and the whole issue of reparations is being discussed globally and with us in WILF.
Well, just a little bit more background. There was the Durban 400, which was a group of Black folks from the US that went to Durban for the special meeting. And when they came back to the US after September 11th, a conference was organized in New York on November 1st. And that conference was international, and it was all about reparations. And then in December, the State of the Black World organized a conference in Atlanta. So there was a sense of determination, Robin, from the Black Liberation Movement, that we wouldn't allow September 11th to eclipse what was accomplished in Durban, because the biggest thing was the Palestinians were in Durban in force, and there was lots of support from the Palestinians, and Israel walked out. So 10 years later, the Obama administration held a meeting where they invited many of the folks from the Durban 400, and I was actually at that phone conference meeting with Valerie Jarrett and Samantha Power. And Samantha Power made it clear that they would not, the US would not support the Durban Declaration because Israel was opposed to it. I mean, that came out of her own mouth. So part of what this resolution does in supporting the decade is allows us as people of African descent working for recognition, justice, and development. It allows us to start making connections with other liberation struggles, which is part of what has been done during the decade. The struggle for Cuba is important to get recognition and to end the blockade. So George, if you could scroll down to the action points so that we could see what the obligation is of WILF. And so-
Could I just add that there was a delegation of 17 women of color from WILF US at the Durban conference. I was the one non-woman of color there, the photographer, and I have a number of wonderful tapes that I did that I will hope to recover and show people at some point.
Well, we certainly hope that will be true. Maybe you can do that at the triannual Congress for the US section, which I believe is scheduled to be in 2024, which will be right before the decade ends.
Okay.
Well, we can talk about that, but George, is this the first set of action steps? Promote respect, protection, and fulfillment of human rights.
This is the objectives of the decade. And then these are the triannual steps here.
Yeah, that's what we want to get to. So
Okay.
Stop, George, you're going too far. So the 33rd Triannual WILF Congress welcomes the UN General Assembly's initiative for the International Decade for People of African Descent. And the Congress calls on all sections and groups to support the initiative by disseminating the draft program of action produced by the working group of experts on people of African descent. And I think I have sent that out previously, but we can certainly do that again. But George, you want to read the other obligations for the sections.
Publicizing the welcoming of the proclamation of the International Decade for People of African Descent on WILF sections and groups websites until the end in December 2024. Mandating the workforce on anti-racism to embed the framework of the draft program of action by the working group of experts on people of African descent in their action plan. Working proactively to promote respect, protection, and fulfillment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by people of African descent, and a greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage, culture, and contribution of people of African descent to the development of societies.
Well, this is what, and we have two board members here. So what needs to happen, Linda and Philip, is that the full resolution needs to be put up at the WILF US website as soon as possible. I believe it is up already at the WILF International website. But George, if you could just keep it here so that we, before we go on, so that we'll be real clear about what needs to be done so that we come out of this meeting with a commitment from the board members present to make sure that this obligation of publicizing the resolution and putting it up at the website is going to be done, and making sure there are no questions about it. Now, on the question of mandating the workforce on anti-racism, that is a special committee of the International Secretariat which includes Beatrice Schultes, Melissa Torres, and Leila Aladat. So they are the leaders of that workforce group on anti-racism, which I've expressed interest in participating. So that's something very important that's been put together. And so those are two very strong action steps. Do people have any questions or comments about the action steps? Are they clear? Well, the other really important part about this is the role of the International Secretariat. So George, if you could go to that part. The Congress calls on the International Secretariat to.
And Philip for the stack.
Okay, go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I would suggest that the chair of this committee go forward and speak with Darian about putting the resolution up on the website. Would be the most efficient way to go about that. And I don't think there's any objections from anybody in our section about promoting this. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll be glad to send Darian an email. George could do that since we're the co-conveners of this subcommittee, and we can send the attached resolution to Darian. Thank you, Philip. So the two things that the International Secretariat will be doing, which really involves some serious follow-up. The International Secretariat has pledged to support all of the sections and groups in using relevant spaces available to advocate to strengthen national, regional, and international legal frameworks, including the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and to work to strengthen the full and effective participation. That is the role of the staff of the International Secretariat, and Patricia Scanella has pledged to do that. Now, what they're asking from us is that we report to the next Congress. So when the next Congress happens in 2025, I hope that we'll be able to make a strong report from the US section on what we have accomplished in these years between the two Congresses. From now until the next Congress, all of the resolutions that we promised to pass and the ordinances that we promised to pass in the different cities, we should be able to report that. So we'll probably get a special workshop done on results of the UN decade resolution in the US section. That's a workshop that I would certainly propose that we do, so that everyone can know that the section that supports this resolution took it seriously and worked on it. So what do people think about that idea going forward for 2025? Are there any objections to the idea that we make sure that we can report on our activities at the next Congress as a section? Donna, I see your hand.
I think it's wonderful. And I think that in these next couple of years, we can accomplish a lot of these things. We're excited up here about the Cape, about what we're finding out research-wise. This is great.
And Robin?
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we choose or find dates in the coming years maybe, to focus on. For example, of course, International Human Rights Day is December 10th, to get our branches to focus on this resolution, but also Africa Day. Here in Burlington, for 2 years in a row, we've had Africa Day, and it's been wonderful because the weather is nice and we can be outside and we have food. And the last time we focused on Thomas Sankara, the Che Guevara of Africa. And we will have a film coming out soon about our discussion there. But all sections, all branches could be choosing Africa Day and having a good time and studying the importance of this declaration.
George, could you take down the resolution so that we're with the full gallery here? I think, Robin, that the Black liberation movement and people of African descent and our organizations are going to be doing quite a bit over this period. And because the Fannie Lou Hamer branch is a branch that's almost totally women of African descent, there are a number of activities we have planned because we'll experience Juneteenth of 2023 and Juneteenth of 2024 before we get to the next triennial Congress. So there will be lots of activities in the African diaspora that will be involved. And we keep lifting up the fact that this is the UN decade. I've been so surprised to find out how few people know about the UN decade, and we're 7.5 years into the decade. So we have less than 30 months left on the decade. And so that's what's so kind of crucial about this moment. What can we get accomplished in the next less than 30 months? And so we do have to plan our work and work our plan. So George, the next item on the agenda, what is that? Are you there, George?
I am. This takes me a while. Here we go. Updates.
Okay. So each month we do updates of what's happening in our branch cities regarding the passing of reparations ordinances, because this subcommittee is the UN decade, acknowledging it, but also working on the key demand of the decade and of Black people for hundreds of years is reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans. Robin, is your hand up from a leftover or is it up?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So who wants to give an update about what's happening in Burlington or Cape Cod or in Charlotte, Southern Piedmont, or San Francisco or Tucson about work on reparations in your community?
I have an update about Washington, D.C.
Oh yeah, great. So sorry, Dr. J. So George, could you take down the thing, because I think we can remember the other remaining items. So did you want to speak, Dr. J?
Yeah, a couple of things. There's a lot of work going on in different networks in Washington, D.C. about reparation. There's, I spoke before a group of Episcopal ministers, priests, a few weeks ago regarding some of the spiritual and the economic implication of reparation. People are having story circles and other kinds of events to talk about the post-traumatic stress syndrome in the Black collective. And I want to make a point that the analysis of reparations is an economic analysis, but there are also long-range emotional consequences that have to be dealt with because the trauma is ongoing. And so lots of people are talking about reparations as a payout but there can really be no amount of money that will really compensate people for what has been given. And so, you know, there are various proposals which include a financial payout, but also a apology, government initiatives that address police violence, which is part of the unfolding of violence against Black people, and some healing to be done around African countries that sold people into American slavery. So I just, you know, I'm very encouraged by this. And I want to just make the legal point that the UN declarations and the declarations from other countries are certainly valuable and they support the cause, but we're also looking very carefully at the precision with which American legislation or executive orders are crafted, because ultimately we've seen some proposals floating up that tie payment to reinvestment in housing or other commercial transactions, which, you know, we really don't necessarily think are appropriate. So I think we're going to continue to do this work, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out in the long run.
I'd like to add that I was doing some research for this meeting, and Dr. Robinson, I came across the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts has a toolkit, and I'm sure that it must be a national thing for the Episcopal diocese everywhere. But it was very interesting. I haven't really had a chance to examine it. All I know is that the TEDA has a toolkit for reparations. So they are taking it, it's on the homepage. So it's taking it very seriously, which I really commend the Episcopal Diocese for doing that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Pat, because several years ago, well over a decade, probably 15 years ago, the United Church of Christ came up with a manual in support of reparations, and I do have that manual. So I think that we can probably go to the Catholic Church a few years ago, made an apology for its missionary work in Africa and how wrong they were, and they continue to enhance that apology, the Catholic Church. And in Durham, North Carolina, where I live, the Catholic Church paid reparations of $3 million to the city of Durham in the form of a community center, which gave all of us access to the community center. So the Catholic Church, and now good to hear about the Episcopal Church, the United Church of Christ, and there are many other denominations. And I think that in our communities, we should be sure to reach out to those denominations because having the faith community behind this in cities where we're trying to pass resolutions and ordinances is important. And I say that would certainly be true of DC, Dr. J, because there's every possible denomination in DC. And I know that there are many progressive churches in DC that supported the Poor People's Campaign that would also be likely to support a reparations ordinance passed by the District of Columbia. So I do have something to report from Columbus and the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, but I'll go after everyone else has gone who has something that they want to report at this meeting different from last month.
I just like to suggest that we make a list, that somebody compile a list of all of those, like you said, the Catholic Church, the Church of Christ, the Episcopal Diocese, about all of the things, you know, the reparations efforts that have been made, because it's important when you're, like you said, Teresa, when you're presenting to somebody, a new organization, that you have this list. And I mean, it's testimony, and it's very important to have that.
Well, Pat, what the work is that the branch in Cape Cod needs to reach out to those congregations. And I'll go ahead and report on what we are doing in Columbus, because in Columbus, we formed a community task force, and it involves educators and the person who is our community historian, because Columbus, the city of Columbus, was founded during slavery in 1828. So there are many atrocities that have taken place over these hundreds of years. And so the community historian has listed all of those atrocities, including the lynchings of Black men while they were in the custody of the police of Columbus. So we have all of that data that we've been collecting, and it's already been shared with the city council. So when I spoke before the city council in July, I urged them to look at the Evanston, Illinois resolution, which definitely calls for a payout in support of housing justice. And what I did say to the city council, in keeping with what Dr. J was saying, is that we're not just talking about a paycheck, we're talking about a transformation of society. So we're talking about repairing the damage that was done through the criminal justice system, through the racism in the public education system, through the lack of economic opportunities and the poverty that Black people have been disproportionately experienced in this county that was stolen from the Muskogee. So Muskogee County on Muskogee land. And then, of course, the disparities in healthcare and, of course, housing. So those are the 5 areas that we're looking to work for repairing the damage: criminal justice, economic opportunities, education, healthcare, and housing. Those are the 5 areas we're looking at. And so in terms of economic opportunities, we're discussing childcare subsidies for the mothers who are living in poverty, who would like to get some, and it's like so many jobs are open now. But if you don't have the ability to pay for childcare, which is outrageous cost, then it's hard for you to be able to take a job. So we're looking at that as a specific kind of subsidy that could happen at the local level, which should be happening at the national level for families. So those are the things we're looking at. So on October 5th, Akinyele Umoja, who spoke at our first annual Fannie Lou Hamer branch Human Rights Conference, he has this amazing presentation on the history of reparations and the fight for reparations. So he'll be doing that at the public library in Columbus. And so it will be a community-wide event on October 5th. We've already reserved the room, and he's already committed to be here with us for that 90-minute session. So that's my update about the Fannie Lou Hamer branch and what's happening in Columbus. Are there any other updates? I see Joan's hand is up. So Joan and then Donna.
Donna had her hand up before. Are you ready, Donna? or shall I go ahead?
You should go ahead because I
Okay,
called on you, Joan.
okay.
Don't try to facilitate the meeting,
Okay.
Joan, when I'm facilitating the meeting, Joan.
I understand that, but I didn't know whether you realized that Donna had her hand up earlier. Sorry. Okay, so the group here in the Santa Clara County area, as opposed to just the city of San Jose, includes a lot of other towns. Including the one where I live. Anyway, has been, had a meeting, had at least one meeting and this summer. And I did not hear about that meeting, but until afterwards. And so I don't know for sure everything that happened at the meeting, but the report was that they're, working on it and so on. And again, this is something that is happening as part of the African American Community Service Agency, and therefore they are the leaders on it. And we will be supportive in our branch, of course, but I have not seen anything. As I said, it wasn't a total report on the meeting, probably. I have not seen anything about resolutions yet. So I will bring that up as a question to the person who is a staff member at AACSA and is leading this. He's a graduate, unless he's finished his graduate school, he's a graduate student, but probably an older graduate student in his late 20s rather than early 20s. In any case, I'm in the process of finding out what other organizations are involved in working on this here locally and working with them. Now that's just Santa Clara County, which is the southern part of the San Francisco Bay Area. And you mentioned San Francisco. So perhaps Philip has either a report on what's happening in San Francisco. I don't know whether there is something, but probably, and or the state level, which we shared information in July about the report, which is an extensive 500-page report for those of you who haven't heard about it. And it is a lot of national information about the history and problems, the bad things that happened, of course, as well as some specifics for California. And there may be some other things, but maybe Philip can fill in on the state report also.
Well, California is a step ahead of most states because the ultimate goal is for each state to also pass these reparations declarations. And that is the next step after we get it done in Columbus. And it'll be done in Atlanta, in several communities around Atlanta. So when we have a little bit more of a critical mass, we can get the state legislature to apologize and dismantle what we call the work camps, which is slavery by another name. The state of Georgia still is the penal colony in the whole scheme of things. So there are 25 work camps in the state of Georgia where slavery is legal based on the 13th Amendment. There are communities that turn out several slaves. I mean, not several, but hundreds. And Columbus, Georgia is the largest slave work camp. So we will be calling on an end to the work camps around the state of Georgia. But California is based on that huge report that Joan shared with us, is a bit ahead of most states. So I envision California doing something at the state level sooner than most states. So Donna and then Samantha.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to say that Pat and I have information. The lawnmower people have decided to come outside my window, so I'm calling on Pat to give our information.
Oh,
Pat?
well, I have Meadow Dibble from the Atlantic Black Box Program, and who was revealing the ship captains who carried slaves to Massachusetts, and that there was a really the research I've been doing is just the Atlantic Black Box project. And tonight there's a woman who's going to speak about her own ancestry and owning slaves and the reparations that they are making. So next time maybe I'll be able to say something about that. But the other thing was I looked at Providence. Providence has come out with a program, that has something like 10 steps that they're doing. It's a program rather than payouts, a program rather than payouts. So that's an interesting site to look at if you just want to go to Providence and look at the reparations that their project that they're doing. And the other, I have information. I have a contact, or I can get contact information from Meadow Dibble if you want to have her as a speaker. She's the CEO for the Atlantic Black Box project. And what else do I have on my list?
And she's right here on Cape Cod in Brewster.
Yeah, she's from Brewster, and she actually doesn't live here now, but she. Well,
if you
the other thing I've been looking at is the abolition movement, which is, I know that reparations is our focus, but the abolition movement is sort of like an accessory to that, and there is some activities around that. And there's a book called The Abolitionist Handbook, which has, as Teresa suggested before, the action steps that you can make to, because of the abolition movement extends from anti-slavery movement back in the 1800s and right to the present day around prison and mass incarceration and police brutality and so on. So it's very, very interesting book. And it's written by one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrice Cullors, I believe.
Oh, yeah, I know her.
Well,
let me ask you this, Pat. When you say Providence, do you mean Providence, Rhode Island?
Yes.
Oh, great, because I live there. That's great. I can connect with my friends there.
Yeah.
It is a very progressive state, and it's the People's Republic of Rhode Island.
Yes, and it's an interesting program they have there. So.
Oh yeah, that's
about reparations.
Let's hear from Samantha. Go ahead, Donna.
Add one thing. One thing. First Parish Brewster has a reparations program going because the ship captains were here on the Cape, were the most wealthy, and we're hooking into that information about their program too. I know the person heading it very, very well from being there, and so we've got a lot going on up here.
Oh, it sounds great. Okay, Samantha, what you got?
I wanted to agree with you, Pat, about the prisons. I mean, it's just slavery 2020,
Yeah.
But I think that as a committee, we might want to focus on, putting our support behind the federal push for reparations as policy.
Yeah.
It is a national debt. There are some big organizations that are already doing that. NAARC, are you familiar with that? National African American for Reparations, something.
Well, it's called NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. I'm sorry that Sister Fatima couldn't be here because she's very active in the Louisiana section of NCOBRA. I'm active in the Atlanta section of NCOBRA. They just recently, NCOBRA holds a national convention every year. So the most recent one was in New England, in Connecticut. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because the legislation that John Conyers introduced in 1989 was HR 40. And now Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas is trying to advance that. So when the Congressional Black Caucus meets at the end of September in DC, I'm hoping that the DMV branch will be all over it because usually there's a panel on reparations, and I expect that to be the case this time. I thought I was going to be able to travel to DC, but I won't be able to, Dr. J. So I will talk with you and Lucy and others in the DMV branch about a strategy for connecting with the CBC. Is there something more you want to say about what's going on in Charlotte, Samantha?
No, I spoke about it back in July.
Okay, great. Well, forgive my telemarketers, they call all day long on every phone. So at any rate, are there any other reports, updates from last month? Really appreciate what's going on with Cape Cod. And if you could get the person that you named to possibly speak at our next meeting, which is going to be on September 22nd.
I can check that out.
Yeah, if you could see that, but we need to change the time of the meeting on September 22nd. I'll be speaking at International Peace Day at Winthrop University on September 21st in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So I will be checking out of my hotel at noon, but I won't be to my Durham hotel before 3 o'clock. So I'm wondering if we can change the time, the start time of the meeting on September 22nd to 4 p.m. Eastern time, which would be 1 p.m. On the West Coast. So if we could switch the start time of the meeting to 4 p.m. on September 22nd, I would greatly appreciate that. So does that work for you, Robin, and other people on the East Coast to start at 4 p.m.?
Yeah.
And people in the Pacific time zone, does it work okay with you to start at 1 p.m.? Okay, good. Well, I think the other items on the agenda are announcements. And the one key announcement we want to make sure that people know about is the Palestine and Lebanon, what is to be done webinar, which is going to take place on September 13th. And so I've registered. George, can you make sure that the registration link is in the chat so that people can register? Oh, what's that you put in the chat? What's this? That's what you put in, Pat?
I know I'm putting in the name of the book.
Oh, the name of the book about the slave trade?
No, about the abolitionists.
The abolitionists. Well, one of the key things for the ending mass incarceration and the death penalty, which definitely kind of connects in some ways to this work, there's a very important $30 hard copy book that has come out by Ruth Gilmore, and it's called Abolition Geography.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very important book. So those of you who come as a part of the ending mass incarceration and the death penalty. I would hold it up, but it's in my bed. And so the next time we meet, we can make sure the paperback will come out in the spring of 2023, which will be a little less pricey. But I really wanted to read it for now, since we have the Fannie Lou Hamer branch Human Rights Conference is taking place on December 10th to kind of connect with what Robin was saying, Human Rights Day. So on December 10th, we're going to start out with a panel on the TPNW, but the actual face-to-face event in Columbus is going to be about ending mass incarceration and the death penalty, but it'll all be live streamed, so you'll all be able to participate in both events. So from 9 a.m. until about 2 p.m., that's going to be our conference for the Fannie Lou Hamer Human Rights Conference. So those are the two announcements I wanted to get across. Any other announcements? Well, that sounds great, because it looks like we're ending right on time at about 2. So what time is it, George? What time you got?
3:01.
3:01. Well, we like to try to stick to our 1-hour meeting. So George, be sure to save the chat so that you could share that with everyone.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, the recording we will share with everyone. So have a good rest of your day. I haven't had any lunch yet, so I'm going to take care of that. So
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, George.
Great. Have a
George,
great
you're
day.
amazing.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone.
Thank
Peace.
you.